Rob, do you have any perspectives on that gut connection?
No, I don't. Some of the stuff that I'm listening to, I've read myself, especially the bacteria, basically triggering one's craving for whatever it wants and not what the person wants. I find that extremely interesting. However, I didn't read about the DNA part of this bacteria, that it was foreign. So that I didn't read about or hear about. You guys are tossing around the cosmic web. I call it the conscious web. Dealing with consciousness, I think that consciousness is basically everywhere. And so in my third book, that's what I did. I said the conscious web was a place where there's nothing but truth in the space. And so basically there was a character in my book that was being trained by an entity, and the entity is telling this person, okay, so this is what's going on. This is where all this stuff is happening. It's basically happening in the conscious web. You tap into, maybe it's sort of like the Akashic record, or, you know, I mean, we've heard all these things tossed around for forever. I think in the end, it is going to be consciousness. Somebody's going to figure it out. I hope it's somebody on this channel where we find a primer to really take a hard look at what consciousness is actually doing. I mean, I read something about multiple personality disorder, which blew my mind. It's almost like the placebo effect, but different, where you can have a person with multiple personalities. They can have pancreatic cancer in one personality, and then in the other personality, physically they're perfectly fine. So when you start thinking about that stuff and looking for the mechanism that causes that to happen, it's almost like our consciousness making a link with the quantum field, I'll just call it the quantum field, and causing these changes instantly, like quantum entanglement or spooky action at a distance.
Yeah.
It's happening. These people are sick in one personality and completely physically fine in another, which is mind-blowing. So, I mean, that's all I have to say about that. You guys can toss that around because, and I think that it could be a consciousness thing. The article I read, they were relating to this as being conscious, as consciousness being like non-local, and the power behind that interacting with the quantum field.
Well, I think I would take that a step further. You're talking about people that have mental issues, or people that have emotional issues that are having those experiences. But I would take it that even a little farther. I remember past lives, and they started out as something that I found out gradually. You know, I had some spontaneous memories, and so I pursued it a little bit more. And I'll be honest with you, I don't feel like they're past lives. I really don't. I think that we are connected to everything all the time. And I'll give you an example of this. Is one that happened to me most recently, and it came from nowhere. I connected to somebody. And it may have been another aspect of myself. And I really think a lot of times that is what we're experiencing, other aspects of ourselves, including some of these beings we may be encountering. They may be just in other parts of ourselves. And if you believe that the universe and everything is connected, then they are another aspect of ourselves. But I was just, I was reading the paper one morning. It was just like any other morning. And there was an article in there about a group of monks that were at a local museum, and they were making one of those sand mandalas. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but they're beautiful. And they make them with sand, and they can't breathe, they can't sneeze, they can't anything for several days, because when they get done, it's this beautiful, beautiful thing. And when they're done, they sweep it up and they take it to a nearby stream and they let the energy go. But when I was looking at the picture in the paper, it was taken from above, where you could see the backs of their heads, as well as the mandala that was being created. And in that moment, it was like all of a sudden I wasn't there. And I was a monk. And I was in a monastery in Tibet. And I was with my brother monks. We were in prayer, and we were being attacked. We were being attacked by the Mongols. And I remember there was a big, huge door, and I remember that somebody broke into that door, and all these people came in, and they started killing the people around me. And I remember that very vividly, that most of my brother monks just sat there in equanimity and just allowed the Mongols to cut them down. But not me, not this person who I was for just a few moments. This person got angry, and this person started fighting back. And of course, this person didn't make it. And as he was dying, he was knocking himself out for not being like the people around him. He felt like he had disappointed everybody that had just died. He had disappointed himself in his anger. And what was really weird is it's like I stepped in that moment, and I said, wait a minute, you're just a human being. You're not any worse or any better than anyone else, and you need to forgive yourself. You need to forgive yourself. You just reacted, and there's nothing you can do about it now, but you need to be free of that. And what was really strange is he was in death, and he released from that. But all of a sudden I had this huge thing come off of my shoulders to the point that I was like in tears. Now I connected to something or someone. I don't know who it was. I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if it was another part of me, but it was an instant connection, and somehow I went there, and just by viewing that picture, I was there.
Can I interject?
Sure.
Yeah, what it is you're interconnecting on a multi-universe level. It's just like encountering UFOs, ghosts, all the rest of it.
Oh, it's all the same. It's all the same.
I had the same thing. I was sitting paying the bills online, sitting on the couch. My wife walked in the door. She had a hat on that I didn't recognize. She walked by. I said, "Hi, honey." And she didn't stop and acknowledge me or run over to give me a kiss, as she always would, and walk through the kitchen into the other part of the house. And I sat there going, what the hell? I wonder why she's mad at me.
Yeah.
I sat there for 5 minutes. I walked across the
child
kitchen.
support, or the idea of child support, is not valid.
Somebody else was talking?
It's just that.
And I went over there, and my nephew was sitting there, and I said, "Where's my wife, Glenda?" And I never saw her. So I walked outside, went down the stairs, really hard because I had a back operation a month before, massive pain. And there she is, just driving in, backing up. And I said, what are you doing, practicing backing up or something? She says, "No, I just got home." So what you call a doppelganger, it was really a time slip, or seeing somebody just like my wife from a multi-universe. And I was shocked, and for weeks after that, going, what the hell's next? Because I've had this weird stuff my whole life,
I have too. And it's not, I mean, I have UFOs, but I also have I have a lot more of these kinds of strange experiences than I do UFOs. And the most recent UFO that I saw, this is very interesting. And this is where, when we were talking earlier about communicating and being open with people as well as these beings, I went out one morning to pick up my newspaper. It was last October. And it was just the prettiest, clearest morning I'd seen in a long time. It was still dark outside, and you could still see the stars. And I looked up, and I could see Orion. It was just beautiful. And I remember I felt really good. And I thanked the universe for bringing me this marvelous day. And I looked up, and there was a UFO right in the middle of Orion's torso. And it was moving around within that torso, flashing, and I just said thank you, And it made me feel really good. I mean, I felt like it was a wonderful moment, and I think that it worked.
Wow.
It did because of my sense of gratitude.
Definitely.
And
Yeah, it's the belly brain talking to you.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Could we
I-
jump to Donna for a second? Donna hasn't had a chance to share yet.
Okay.
And Donna has some really interesting experiences. And Donna, would you share that recent experience, whatever you feel comfortable with, that was fearful? And, we hear a lot of positive stuff. Do you feel comfortable sharing?
Okay, sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, talking about the gut instincts, I've been face to face with alien beings, over the course of my lifetime, and your initial instinct is absolute terror. As a child, I had the night terrors and woke up screaming. And over the years, I learned to communicate more with the aliens and become less afraid. And I remember asking them, why do you terrorize us so much? And one of them explained that the fear, really strong fear, is actually necessary because where do you feel the fear the most? You feel it right in your solar plexus, right in your gut. And they do that as a means of shaking us up and kind of waking us up and getting us to crack open the wall we've built around ourselves to protect us from fear or the unknown or whatever. And by shocking us with that level of fear, it kind of awakens something in our gut. And hearing you people talk about the gut bacteria and everything with consciousness, I didn't know about that. So that just totally ties in with what the messages I've been given as far as you need to awaken your gut, and then once you get past the fear, then you can begin communicating with them and learning more.
Yeah, but the vibration you're talking about is actually, I think, and I've talked to Bud Hopkins about this many years ago, and it's common. You get a vibration when a ship is coming towards you, and I've had them, 100 feet away, take up half the sky with, witnesses around me that, some of them are still scared 40 years later, because we lose 7 hours, and they're still scared to talk about it 40 years later. But we all felt the vibe over numerous times. You feel the vibration. It's almost like an electrical current. I think they switch us, the entanglement, or our cells, into just a slight different vibration, so we can actually see them and be taken.
And I just wanted to chime in for just 1 second because of what Donna just said. The terror, the fear you feel when you actually see the being, like I encountered a Nordic extraterrestrial that walked out right in front of me and did the entrainment on me. And that it's a very visceral, or geez, how do you say it? Visceral feeling. Yeah, it's so traumatic because your body has been like this body. Even if you're a starseed, we are still, an Adamu being. We have this body that we've been plugged into in the evolutionary formula as a primate being, Homo sapien. So there's millions of years of collective memory in terms of what we think exists in our ecosystem. So when something walks out in front of you, even before you know what it is, the intelligence of the body, perhaps the brain of the gut, has this visceral response where you will react, and that's what I did. You react in a way, even if it looks human. It's interesting how the intelligence of the body, if it came from something outside of our ecosystem, has to do with evolution. We have this flight or fight response, and I choose flight. So I went like that, and he looked fairly normal. I mean, he was a Nordic extraterrestrial, larger eyes, just a little taller. He was human looking, so he wasn't a reptilian, he wasn't a gray. He was a human looking extraterrestrial. And I talked with him for several hours. And but it was just interesting that initial response, I was shaking like a leaf.
Kevin, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I'm always curious about this. How do you react to other living things? Like as a child, did you have a good relationship with nature? did you, like when I was a kid, I loved bugs and creepy crawlies and all that kind of stuff. And I think one reason I don't have the fears that some people have is because I'm familiar and I'm comfortable with things that aren't like me at all. What is your experience with things like that?
My parents had a dog kennel, and so I grew up around dogs, and we lived out in the country, so I was really into animal life, and I watched Bill Nye the Science Guy and Kratz Creatures, and I was totally into animal life. And in the program, I was used as an empath. But in my teenage years, and I'm not going to get into the story now, but just to answer your question, when I was walking along the street late that night, and this being actually walked out in front of me, I just, like, my body, the intelligence of the body, reacted before I could think, before the mind, the interpreter, could actually, because of the conditioning of my upbringing, my actual physical body reacted when I saw him. And I think that has to do with evolution as a primate. Right. So just being somewhat aware, because of Darwinian evolution, what is in our ecosystem. This being didn't evolve naturally in our ecosystem. So it's like going to the Galapagos Islands and dropping a lion in the middle of a little desert island. All the animals are going to freak out as soon as they see this lion. And that's how I freaked out. And he calmed me down within a couple minutes, and he did the entrainment. But I just thought that was interesting that when I saw this thing, even though it looked human, it wasn't exactly human. And my body was shaking, and he was totally nice, but I was shaking.
Giorgio,
what color was his eyes?
I would like to ask something.
Giorgio, you have had a lot of experiences with different groups and teaching them how not to have fear, and you've had a lot of contact experiences. Do you want to speak to fear or those contact experiences that you've had?
No, I have not been teaching any group how not to have fear, basically, no. And I have not had many contact experiences. What I do have is like an intuitive understanding, as though my information field, my mental information field, blends a little bit with visitors, let's call them visitors, okay? In a friendly way, as though I know them personally, but I have not seen them with my eyes, okay? And this since about the age of 12. No, what I told you some time ago was that, yeah, our bodies instinctively react beyond what we might be wanting or thinking. But if it's like a different, it's an adaptation to a different reality, as though our reality is going to disappear. It's a sensation of erasing what we know. But that's in the beginning. From my contactee friends, once they overcome this stage or prepare for gradual, let's say, getting used to this experience, then the situation changes completely. There are practices, exercises that are highly recommended. For example, before going to a programmed sighting where a contact may happen, it's much better not to eat meat for several days, to drink plenty of water, to meditate, to, you know, it's a gradual adaptation. We need to work on our bodies as well in order to adapt to that different vibration.
Great. Joe, what do you think about that? Your mic's a little low right now.
Hello?
Can you? Oh, there we go. We got you now, Joe.
Okay. So are you hearing me now? Yeah.
Yes.
I actually wrote several articles on the issue of overcoming fear because my first 5 years in the contact network, I was associated with Dr. Greer. I haven't spoken to him for over 20 years, but for 5 years, I've been described as his lieutenant. I'm not sure that's an accurate description. Grant once described me as Dr. Greer's right-hand man, but
actually his right-hand man was a woman, Sherry Adamek. And I was the third most prominent member of the network in the early days. But we had political and personal differences, but I still support the idea of Ce-5 very much. And when I was a trainer, and I was empowered to recapitulate the work of Dr. Greer, and I'd go out and recruit people and train contact teams, one of the articles I wrote was Overcoming Fear. And from my readings, Whitley Strieber helped a lot. He had great fear, and he wrote about it extensively. One of the points he made, which was brought up here several times, is that we are hardwired in a certain sense through evolution to react to an unknown animal as potential predator. Because as we evolved, we were hunters and gatherers, and early in our history, we were more likely being hunted than hunters. And so we react to an unknown animal as a potential predator, because if we don't know what it is and what its capabilities are, if we're not frightened, we could be devoured. We could be lunch. So perhaps our innate fear of snakes is based on that. So one of the things I ask people to do, and you have to remember in historical context, during the early days of the Ce-5 initiative, we did not know how far we were going to go. And the stated goal, it sounds kind of romantically optimistic, but the stated goal in the early days was landings and boardings. And although individual have had landings and boardings, Dr. Greer has memories of onboard experiences, none of our contact teams really were successful in having any landings other than the ones that occurred with Dr. Greer, where you had a hover in England. And but still, we were very excited, and we wanted to overcome our fear with the possibility that such encounters would occur. So I would ask people to watch alone the movie Communion in a dark room and see if they were frightened. And we all were kind of scared when we watched that movie, and we discussed our fears together, and collectively we felt reassured. So the struggle to overcome fear is not just something we do internally, but also through group process, and to support one another, and also to be kind, as we heard the cosmic librarian say when she described her a past life or other life experience, someone else's life. We have to be kind and compassionate to our fellow humans and say, yes, fear is often a reflex, a response, a gut reaction. And I also want to underscore what Giorgio said, which was important, and that was that the collective mass consciousness of our civilization, of our entire culture, is in denial. And when we are confronted with an extraterrestrial being, that denial is smashed. It's completely torn away. And we live in a world and in a culture where contact is forbidden. It's not supposed to happen. It's not supposed to be real. And what we feel is a kind of perhaps existential fear, because the world we are totally immersed in terms of this 3D or 4D physical reality, is in denial. And so our whole world seems like it's being destroyed when we are confronted with what we believe are irrefutable experiences, indicating we are not alone. There's a whole new world out there, and it's not the one we grew up with. As it was said in The Wizard of Oz, somehow I don't think this is Kansas, Toto. You know, this is a whole new, fearful, unknown, but also exciting world we can experience in contact.
Can I interject for 1 second before I leave?
Please.
Fine and dandy theory, but to the experiencer that wakes up screaming in such shock of fear and bleeding, which ends up in infections from the torture that you've gone through and a lifetime of this, it's a completely different thing. I mean, a theory that, oh, we should all have peace and hold hands and sing or the world, and that's the way it should be is one thing. And you can read all you want.
I think
but
we should
go through the fear. There's no bullshit about
Hey, Doug.
criticize. Yeah, I'm sorry, Kevin. Hold on. Let me interject for a second.
Sure.
I don't think we should criticize anyone else's perspectives. Other people have very.
He's talking theory. He's talking theory, and I'm
he's
just
not talking theory. He's actually been out there CE5ing, and he's had experiences.
And he said he's never had experience. They'd never seen anything. I mean, I thought this was a group of experiencers. Okay, bye-bye. What a joke.
Okay, well,
Bye-bye.
Doug,
No, we were hoping for more love and understanding and communication than that.
Sorry, I was going to say to Doug there.
Go ahead, Gary.
I understand where you're coming from. My experiences have been completely negative. Every time I've had the craft fly over me, and the one instance where they actually sent a being out to talk to me that looked very human-like, but it wasn't human. It scarred me for life, and it was completely traumatic. And that's I'm not going to go into a big story here, but it was beyond frightening to see something up close. It was yeah.
I'll give you one example. I'll give you one example just so you, before I leave. Witnesses, broad daylight, comes in, gone, wake up on a table in the UFO with a hybrid beside, trying to calm you down, and an alien in between your legs, shoving something up your ass. Electric shock. They were milking your prostate to get sperm. All you can move is your cheeks. You fight, just your cheeks. You come to in the middle of a field with your underwear covered in blood and with infections from, that experience because they're taking sperm again. That's fear. That's not theory. It's not Space Brothers.
Everyone has different experiences, and I think it's important for people to respect your experiences, respect your feelings.
These are witness experiences, not sitting out in the field and hoping something comes down because they're Space Brothers. But
other people have different experiences, and I think you should be open-minded to their experiences as they should be to yours.
I believe in people who have had close encounters, but they've seen them, they've experienced them.
I have. I think a lot of people have fear and how they deal with it on different levels and different experiences. And I think also too, because this is a phenomena that deals with the consciousness and subconsciousness, that can affect your experiences as well too. It can increase your positive experiences.
Right.
It can also increase your chances of negative experiences.
And also too, just to chime in, just to maybe put this into perspective, because when I did interviews with Aquarian Radio, Janet Lesson and Dr. Sasha, they've had positive experiences. But what I said to them is there's two secret space programs. There's the higher density ET secret space program that's been here since the dawn of man. And those are higher vibrational ETs that will sometimes abduct humans, communicate telepathically through channelers and dreams. That's the positive side of the secret space program. But then there's a very real physical secret space program, and that has to do with the military. My labs has to do with abductions and deals that our governments and the world governments cut with certain physical beings that actually come here in a craft. Okay, these are third density beings, just as physical as me and you, that have the technology as a spacefaring civilization to come here in craft and make deals with the government. And our government basically sold us out for tech. And that's why there is a UFO government. And I mean, we all know this. There's a UFO cover-up, and our government has been making deals for technology. And this is where the human sex trade and slavery comes into it, because there's millions of people that get abducted. There's also millions of people that go missing every year. Usually from third world countries. Children go missing and no one looks for them. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people that are being taken off planet. And that's the human sex trade and slavery trade and the experimentation that goes on Mars, because they are doing business with them on Mars. And I know this is a big subject, but there's two secret space programs. There's the kind of the MyLab military space program where they are working with the Greys and the reptilians. These are physical beings just like me and you. And then there's the higher density, fifth, sixth, seventh density ethereal beings that channelers and psychics and new agers and some of the spiritual people in our world have been working with telepathically. And those are two very different things. And sometimes the waters get a bit muddy between the two, because you can have an experiencer that is experiencing the benevolent, positive side of things, Andromedan contacts, Tausedian, whatever, and then you have like actual gray abductions where your lights are flickering at night, and then you wake up in the morning with injury. Okay, that's a little different than just doing some meditation and some channeling and getting downloads. And then also seeing the craft and being with the beings. So, sorry, I just wanted to put that into perspective.
Well,
Can I interject quickly?
Sure.
I just wanted to say that, let's not pretend that any of us have any of this figured out. Like this is all a crapshoot and a completely unknown realm where, there is the most horrifying experiences on one end of the spectrum, and there's the most benevolent and amazing and spiritual experiences on the other. And we already know that there's, well over 60 species that, documented according to, some of the people who've whistleblowers who have come forward. So, I mean, we know that there's a lot happening, and that there, to try to, dictate the idea that, we've got this all down to a science, that it's all figured out is a little premature in my opinion. I mean, there's so much to be figured out from here going forward. But again, I want to reiterate what AP is saying, and even on everybody else's side, I think that any one experiencer's experiences are their own, and that we all need to come in here with compassion and respect for every kind of experience that may have happened, good or bad.
I agree.
We may be getting the experience we need as an individual, and it may not be a pleasant one.
Right.
Anything else in life, and it's part of our growth. And it's too bad that some people are having the bad experiences and a few people are having really good experiences, and I just have experiences all over the place. They're just all different. But it's somehow it is giving us something we need to help move us forward. And it may not always be what we think is good.
There's so much to learn from everyone's different experiences. Candace, you haven't spoken yet, and you've had some experiences. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on what everyone's talking about, the good and negative experiences versus your own role in that.
Yeah, so, my experiences have been largely positive. The experience I had with it being in my room, I didn't have fear. It was like I didn't have, I don't know, it was like I was being helped. They were, or she, as I thought she was protecting me, because even the way she appeared was very gentle. She appeared like she looked like the Virgin Mary. She had her back to me, and she looked like the Virgin Mary. So I thought, I didn't think anything. I was just shocked to see something standing in my room. But then when I turned around, obviously it was not the Virgin Mary, but I later realized that was just a gentle entrance. It was just a way to sort of soften me to what was happening. And so, there's that. And then I also agree with, I think it was Cosmic Library, I'm not sure, said that we get the experience we need, based on our own consciousness, our own place in ourselves. These things come from. I mean, we're all co-creators in the planet here, doing that, and then there's also the black ops. Okay, let's just get that out on the table, because Stephen Greer has said some things, and whether you believe him or not, we do know there are government programs, have been government programs that use mind control and all kinds of different things to cause people to have what they believe to be alien experiences or ET experiences, when in fact that might not be the case.
Yeah, they just found those sonic weapons in China and in Cuba and all those different things. So who knows what kind of effect these different weapons that they're able to produce can do. Joe, you seemed like you're about to speak there for a second.
Yeah, I am. Sure, I'm happy that AP added his contact experiences to this discussion because they represent a very important part of the spectrum. And we have to acknowledge the possibility that a lot of us who are in what have been called touchy-feely or space brothers, these are not the terms that I use, but who have a more positive view on contact, we may have had contact experiences that were as horrific as AP and others have had. Our memories have been blocked. And John Mack, and I recommend both his books on the abduction phenomena, one of the points he made after describing a woman who had years of sexual charged encounters with aliens that were very abusive in nature. She had difficulty remembering much of that experience, and he commented that that possibly could have been an act of kindness from the so-called extraterrestrials, that they will block many members. And so I think we should be open to the possibility that many of us who are going in the Ce-5 or Rama and other groups may have had experiences that were equally shocking, but our memories have been wiped. Now, another point that I'd like to make is that I had a chance to interview 5 people through the free study who made claims of spontaneous, amazing cures and healings at the hands of the alleged ETs. And one of the individuals described something very similar to what AP has had. He is a retired DEA agent and former Dade County policeman. And for 10 years, he had recurrent visitations that left him totally drained, as if he had sex all night, kind of ache in his genitalia that young people experience early in their sexual lives when they're having sexual relations, sometimes more than once, twice, even 3 or 4 times in the 24-hour period. So these were very disturbing too. And at the end, finally, he was given an explanation by an ET being who explained it was something they had to do. They apologized for the terror and the pain that they caused. That individual went on to join the touchy-feely people, as we've described, the so-called space brother lovers, as we've been described. And he became an activist within Rama, and he worked with 6-foot Roswell. He was able to overcome a lot of his very negative feelings after he got an explanation and an apology from the beings. And I think there's something to be learned there, that with emotional support, with counseling, I'm not talking about hypnotherapists who have had a 12-week course in hypnotherapy and then have their own personal agendas to write a book or extract the most horrific tales. That with proper support, people can actually go over from feeling quite appropriately victims of abuse to people who are more open to the positive aspects of contact. I've never heard the opposite. I've never heard a person who's had a positive contact experience or a positive view of contact, or a Ce-5 or a Rama person who subsequently had dragged out violent or abusive abduction experiences. And
that's a very interesting point.
So we have the possibility of healing. I'm not saying that exists for you, AP, but I know it's possible. I would hope that you have the benefit of some support from family and friends, and if it's appropriate, and only you know that, to seek not a hypnotherapist, but someone who's gone through an extensive psychological training program with peer review and help you sort out the issues. And maybe you, if you can't have a more positive view of your contact experiences, perhaps you'll have more peace in terms
More
of
understanding.
you've
Yeah.
been understanding from the suffering you've been doing.
There's someone here in the group who is from the Monroe Institute. If that person wants to, or very well informed, excuse me, on the Monroe Institute, if that person wants to chime in, we'd love to hear your perspective on this specific fear issue. But if not, I'd like to just comment a little bit on it as well too. As a contact group that's getting closer and closer contact, we have certain thoughts and notions based on our experiences, and we would experiment and try a little bit something more and get a little closer, and our experiences got deeper and deeper, and we have we have the blessing of a location where we can do this regularly, and it allows for a lot of privacy and allows for growth. So we've been practicing different methods, and conquering fear is a real major part of it. And when you talk to different CE5 groups, it's an integral part of it, because if you think about it, if there is in this advanced civilization that's visiting us and they can read your subconscious, and that they're compassionate enough to care about your feelings and not freak you out, that kind of, you know, says something about them, or at least the ones you're experiencing with. And I think that they're writing a story. They're the ones in control. They write the script. This is their circus. This is their show. And they allow as much, I believe, as, you know, this is just my perspective, that you can take. And they will give you the spoonfuls and not the whole meal at once. And my belief is that for CE5ers and experiencers who seek the contact, that at first, in order to kind of train you, kind of like my dog trains me, is by having distant contact first, making that connection first, distant, flashes, basic. Okay, wow, that was cool, it was exciting, it was positive, it was safe, it was distant, yay. And then a little bit closer, whoa, ooh, it's closer, it's exciting. And then before too long, if your spirit and everything is there and you're not fearful, you'll get closer and closer, and you'll get stuff bouncing around the treetops. And then past there is when the mojo, that's when it's really on. And that's when the greater fear possibilities emerge, when you're talking about closer and closer contact and phenomena.
It's like falling in love. It's just like falling in love. Think about it.
But in a way, it's like building a relationship. Like
yes,
anything,
it is.
Respectful distance. And, you know, I believe that there is a universal form of communication that can be made with these. I think it's very illogical to attack them to get information and, you know, material from the crashed ships, when if you were wise enough to have universal passive communication, you could possibly get more information, because it seems like they want to communicate. Countless times they're returning flashes of lights when someone in a boat does it, or a pilot they'll mimic a pilot. They're starting the initial forms of communication. And we believe, and we have this little thing that we like to believe is protocols to make that connection happen. And those protocols are really super simple. Any one of us can understand them. I happen to have the benefit of living in the woods, and there are deer all around. And deer are very wild animals. They're very frightened of people in general. Some aren't. They all have personalities, but you've probably seen a video on YouTube, or maybe many, where someone will have a relationship with a deer over time, and they would get less and less fearful and less fearful. And before you know it, the deer is eating out of their kitchen. Now, I don't expect to have a gray eating out of my kitchen in like a year from this stuff, but you never know. So, you know, that's just a thought, and, you know, to share with you, and that's the principle we're operating on.
Can I say,
this is Doug. This is Doug Ald, AP.
Hi, Doug.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in for a second and say, you know, as above, so is below. I mean, the way we treat animals is analogous to this. Some of us pick up beautiful little animals and pet them and let them down, or catch various animals and let them go. And what they're thinking is, gee, wow, I had a close encounter with this big human being and it let me go. Sometimes we're tagging animals and we're anesthetizing them. and we're doing experiments on them, and then we're letting them go. Sometimes we're catching them and killing them. Sometimes we're catching them and dissecting them. We're doing all sorts of things to animals, and I don't see any reason why in the pecking order of living creatures in the universe that the same isn't happening with us. So I don't see any. It's a shame Doug earlier decided to bail out. I would have liked to have heard, I know he was a little short-tempered with everybody, but I would have liked to have heard a little bit more thorough story from him as to how he got the way he is. He sounded like he needed a support group or some help. And I would have liked to have heard a little bit more of his story. And then the last thing I wanted to say was, I agree with I think it was Strange Powers that said we really don't have a clue about what any of this is. But I just wanted to say that I had an event happen in my bedroom, and when this event happened, I was so frightened of it, I woke up and I pushed it away. I cursed it and pushed it away. But several weeks later, and I wrote about this, I invited it back. And I waited. I actually spiritually invited it back. I just asked him. I said, why was I so frightened of whatever this was come back? And it did. And when it came back, I had this entire event where I held my fear this time, and I transformed an event that would normally have been very frightening into one that wasn't. And this event was an amazing thing, and I had a rapport with whatever this was. And once it let go of me. It's almost like we completed something. It drifted away, and I knew I would never see this thing again, and I haven't ever since. It's got to be 4 years. So I took what was a very frightening event and turned it around into something that wasn't so frightening. So it's a matter of where you're at and how you view what you consider to be frightening or not. Thanks.
That's a great bunch of points. Were you about to say something, Rob? No, okay.
Well, yeah, I was. I mean, it's sort of on the lines of what that this last gentleman, how he started, where he wanted to hear more information from the gentleman who had that horrific experience, and it sounded like this has been happening over and over and over again. And if it's to him, I actually feel bad for the guy. And I think maybe he did come online and he wanted to talk to, some experiencers so that he could express himself and get some information. Now, I listened to what everyone had to say, and, he probably felt like he was jaded, and like he really wasn't listening to it, because right away, everyone got back on to this positive, and maybe he needed to learn something, and maybe on all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure he didn't like to hear that. I'm sure that bothered him. So
I think we should reach out to him, and I want to reach out to him as well too. And
yeah, I mean, I would, because if this gentleman is suffering from these episodes, I think we should take a hard look at what he's going through, because just maybe, and it probably is. He believes it, so it probably is happening to this guy, and it should be something that we should look at, because we've all heard that all these experiences aren't always nice. You know what I'm saying? So we need to focus on that, even though it's scary to think that something so powerful steps into your life and takes complete control and violates you. I mean, that's some serious stuff. So
that's
whether
call the police, it's like 911. Hello, yeah.
So I just want to say that I feel for the guy, and I hope he comes back, expresses himself, and I mean, I would want you guys to listen to me if that was happening, to me.
Great point, Rob. Great points. You haven't spoke yet, and you've had multiple different experiences. And every time you speak, I love hearing your experiences. Do you have any thoughts or perspectives on this, especially the fear and different positive and negative experiences? Have you had a really negative experience?
You're speaking to me.
Oh, Steve.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Steve.
Okay. Well, most of my experiences when I look back on them, have been positive, but they didn't start out that way. When they first started out, we were terrified, absolutely terrified. But once you get past that initial fear, then things can change. But a lot of people are terrified when this happens, because at the end of an experience, the beings wipe your memory. So the next time you have another experience, it seems like the first time again, and you experience that fear all over again. But generally, what has happened to me has been mostly positive. There have been a couple of negative incidents that I haven't talked about yet, and I'm still deciding on whether I want to do that or not. But generally, they have ended on a positive note.
That's great.
It has to do with analogies with our behavior towards animals, and the point that was made that since we torture and kill and dominate animals, it's understandable that extraterrestrials might want to do the same to us. And there's a tendency for us to project our behaviors in a kind of ethnocentric or egocentric way, projecting them on cultures, civilizations that we really don't know very much about. This is a guess, but my guess is that a culture that has developed the capability of traveling between star systems or developed the capability of moving between dimensions is not only going to evolve technologically and psychically, as we know the ETs have, with their tremendous psi capability, but I'm putting forward the notion that spiritual and ethical development may also occur. The reason why I say that is something that came out from none other than Dr. Carl Sagan, who in his original Cosmos series, in the last episode says, "Who will speak for Earth?" The idea is that if a society develops technological means to destroy its own civilization, I'm talking about the development of nuclear weapons, and now the uncontrolled effect of climate change brought on by, in large part by fossil fuels, that a civilization that doesn't go through ethical or spiritual development it's not likely it's going to get out very far into space, because it will self-destruct, because it has not undergone that ethical or spiritual evolution. So I think we should exert some kind of discipline or caution when we are eager to project on the extraterrestrials things that we do to animals. Because my belief is we should consider the opposite. If they got here, not only can they handle themselves in a fight if they're attacked, which they have been attacked, and they have taken self-defense measures. In self-defense, the right to life is, I think, a basic right. And they also have very possibly developed spiritually and ethically, so that they will not treat animals or us the way we treat animals.
It seems by some of the evidence that's been out there that that is the case, because it's obvious on numerous encounters they had the opportunity and most likely the means to down craft that had locked on weapons and other things like that. And numerous times it seems very logical to assume that they have turned the other cheek. And with just the sheer ability they have to turn on and off this metamaterial to make themselves invisible, them choosing to allow themselves to be visible is putting themselves in a position of vulnerability. And numerous times they've done that. The Rendlesham case is a very big, showy case where they really put on a show and they really were putting on a message. There was multiple different types of craft reported by numerous really credible witnesses, radar, numerous witnesses, numerous different aspects came out to that. So, a lot of people feel like there's this story unfolding and they're writing the script in a large way. So before we leap to assume their threat across the board as a military national threat, we should look at some of the past behavior, see if that's really true or not.
Well, and how much of these negative experiences are actual extraterrestrials and how much of it is black projects, you know, earthbound
There could be
stuff?
also, there could be psychological stuff as well going on. There could be all sorts of different angles to this stuff. The free study that's coming out is going to have a lot of really great information and stuff. So I'm really looking forward to that groundbreaking stuff. Does anyone have any perspective on the free? Joe, you wrote some stuff for free, correct? You did some studies? Your mic. Joe, your mic is down. Can anyone else hear Joe?
Okay, the book is coming out in August, Beyond UFOs. And one of the chapters that I was involved with is Reports of Healing. That organization was a co-creation of UFO intelligence and experiencers. And I think that book and the network that generated the book is an example of the kind of, you want to say, interspecies or transcultural exchange where we are actually getting assistance from UFO intelligences to do organizing work by having people like Ray Hernandez, who has tremendous organizational skills. He's a co-founder of Free, was basically recruited by UFO intelligence and given the mission, which he's done quite a bit to fulfill in the last few years. So I think we're already seeing a level of cooperation which can serve as a model for future types of advances in the field of contact. My frustration is that there aren't more people like Ray Hernandez. Why is UFO intelligence holding back? If what I believe is true, that 10% of the population has had a sighting and that there's a consciousness link between UFO intelligences and humans, and they have the ability.
We lost your audio.
Long. What is taking? You lost me?
Just for a second. What has taken so long?
What has taken so long for UFO intelligences to bring forward more Ray Hernandez's, more people like Grant Cameron and others? And so
maybe
we have to say that if contact is a dance, we are the less active partner in the dance. We are being led, and I suspect they have the master plan. They have the ability to protect contact activists. I've had a number of experiences where I should have died and did not through intervention of non-human intelligence. And they, one of the people who you'll read about if you get Beyond UFOs is a contact experiencer who for 25 years suffered from what's called chronic myofascial. It was also known as chronic fatigue syndrome. And after 25 years of suffering, she was cured in one night. And she asked people, they asked the ETs, why did you do this? And their answer was we take care of our own. They have a sense of family with many experiencers, and they have the ability to protect us and give explanations as to why they are hurting us when they do.